Welcome to the first of my 3-year-end lists, and given that it's 2020, it's the worst year ever, we gotta start on a negative note so we can finish up on a high note. So without any further ado, my friends, let's talk about the 10 worst movies of the worst year. And before the countdown begins, I just want to say that, as always, you know the drill. These are just my opinions. These are just my thoughts on these movies. And if you love any of them, that's awesome. I honestly feel jealous. I wanted to love these movies. I want to love every movie that I ever watched. Just didn't work for me. And of course, most importantly, I want to know your thoughts. What are your top 10, top 15, 20, 25, or even top 5 worst movies of the year? Let me know that in the comments below. And if you're new here, consider clicking the subscribe button so you can stay tuned into all the year-end lists that are coming very soon. Without any further ado, no dishonorable mentions. Let's begin. At number 10, we have The Tax Collector, a film that feels like another nail in the coffin of David Ayer, who has been just on a bad luck streak this past few years. A film that has enough promise as a premise, but does nothing worthy of having a story told about it. There's a paper-thin family dynamic that the film kind of hopes it works, and it really doesn't. It falls completely flat. It also boasts some of the worst editing of the entire year, and this is just number 10? So the only good thing about this film really feels like it's the production value and the fact that they're shooting in the streets of LA, but Shia LaBeouf makes me feel very uncomfortable in this film. And I'm not talking about the things that came out about him recently, that's completely different, but he goes for this accent in this film that feels very offensive. And I'm a white dude talking about it. It just feels so uncomfortable to hear him talk that way, and also it's very inconsistent. It goes in and out of the film like whenever he wants him. It feels like there was no direction towards him having or not having that accent at all, so nothing really in this film works. You don't particularly like any of the characters, and trust me, this is a complaint that will emerge a lot in this video. So The Tax Collector is an extremely bad movie, and unfortunately it's the best out of these bad movies. At number 9, we have Artemis Fowl, a film that everybody shat on as soon as it came out. Myself included, however, I don't despise this film as much as others. I see qualities in it that others don't. But the fact that it is on this list tells you something. The editing, again, is all over the place. This film is too fast and yet too slow at the same time. Characters feel like they have no direction whatsoever, and this is directed by Kenneth Branagh, a filmmaker that I adore. And if you just look at the premise, it is very promising. It's this high fantasy world with all this lore coming in, but that's exactly what this film is. It's 90 minutes of lore coming right into your face, and you cannot grasp a single bit of it. It's like Harry Potter meets Home Alone, but then it only grabbed the worst elements of each of these films and just made a hodgepodge of whatever it is that they wanted to come out, because nothing really works. Of course, we know there was a lot of studio meddling, and unfortunately that made the movie come out butchered before it was butchered by audiences and critics. At number 8, Super Intelligence. Another team up between Melissa McCarthy and Ben Falcone. Also, another very unfunny team up between Melissa McCarthy and her husband, Ben Falcone. These two just don't seem to work when it comes to making films. I'm sure everything is working out amazingly at home because they keep wanting to make films together. They got a show now coming out on Netflix, but this film, for all its faults, and there are many, commits the mortal sin when, being a comedy, it isn't funny at all. The plot is generic, the story is told in a generic way, and again, a very unfunny way where nothing relevant happens. I said this in my review. When you have the apocalypse in your film, yes, that's not the most compelling story element to include, but it should never be in the background, relegated and calling out the minimal attention from our characters. It's the apocalypse. Nothing is bigger than the apocalypse. At number 7, we have Songbird, a film that I thought was directed by Michael Bay. Turns out it wasn't, but that didn't make things any better. It feels like a movie that two bros reminded themselves of, oh, there's a pandemic going on. I don't know why they talk like that, they just do talk like that. Oh, there's a pandemic going on. You want to write a movie? Yeah, I want to write a movie. Let's write a movie about the pandemic, bro. And so it feels like it was written in a weekend with no thought put into it, nothing new, no ideas to explore with these characters. The best thing about this film is seeing one or two actors that you haven't seen in a while and you're like, oh, I recognize that person. I haven't seen them in a while. It was probably the two bros who wrote this film saying, let's cast this person so people will be like, oh, I haven't seen that person in a while. It's one of those films that the characters are not particularly likable, the story is nothing new, and it's the worst version out of every pandemic movie that you've seen, except now we can kind of relate, so maybe they were hoping for that, but also it feels like exploitation of everything that is going on. It feels like too soon to rub salt in that wound, and yet this is not the last film where we will talk about how it is exploitation. At number 6, we have Capone, a film that I have no idea what it was going for, if it was trying to go for anything at all, because again, it feels like it has no direction, the actors seem completely uninterested, they just want to collect a paycheck, and I can't blame them, you gotta pay rent, you gotta eat, it's a job. However, it's just a nothing. It's a hodgepodge of completely inconsistent scenes following very different scenes tonally wise. There's a scene where it's supposed to be very heavy drama, and then you're kind of supposed to laugh out of awkwardness, I guess. There are several sequences where Capone, played by Tom Hardy, which should be awesome, it's just him shitting himself. Or learning to wear diapers. Or talking about like this, which again, he's going for that Nick Nolte thing, where you're not sure, is this a really good or a really bad performance? And that's the most interesting thought to have about this film. However, given the script, I can't blame Tom Hardy. I wouldn't know what to do with this. Number 5, we have a film that came out very early in the year, and that is Like a Boss. A film that is supposedly about female empowerment. There's a bad guy woman, there are two good girl women, and then it focuses a lot on the worst qualities of these people. Again, not because they're women, but you just can't root for anyone. And then there are these two side characters. I can't remember if they're brothers or best friends, but they have this very tight dynamic. They're probably the bros that wrote Songbird. They're like, oh, let's go into this movie and be... I'm gonna stop doing that. And in the midst of everything that is unfunny about this film, because the best joke that this film keeps coming back to is the fact that Salma Hayek's boobs are really big, laugh. But then you have these two dudes who have the exact same dynamic that they're going to have in a movie that we are yet to talk about that is coming further in this list, and it's just not funny at all. The people in this film are very, very unlikable, and you just cannot root for this film. At number 4, we have Brahms' The Boy. Quick story, I watched the original The Boy right before this one came out, like 2 days, maybe even 1 day before this one came out. And I thought it was not a good movie. However, I didn't think it was as bad as everyone has been saying for the past 5 or 4 years whenever the first one came out. But the second one is like a slap in the face to the director and writer of the first one, who is the director and writer of the second one. It feels like he slaps himself in the face, and the fans of the original film. They are out there, I have talked to them, but this entire movie just feels like the director writing psych on a piece of paper, and that's the script, because whatever he created in the first film just gets thrown to shit in this one. It just gets deconstructed to no end, and again, the actors don't seem interested whatsoever. The script just jumps in logic and has no coherence whatsoever, and it has the balls to sequel bait you in the end, where again, it doesn't really make sense even within the context of this second movie alone. At number 3, we have Antebellum, a film that I felt very uncomfortable to watch in the worst way possible. This film feels like it is going for that Jordan Peele kind of appeal. That rhymed. But it has none of the grace, none of the nuance, none of the talent, none of the messages that he wants to bring across. It just feels very exploitative. It just feels like it's rubbing salt in wounds that should be left alone, that shouldn't even exist in the first place. It brings up this imagery of old America when people were still allowed to own slaves and whatnot. But then the film doesn't exactly condemn that by the end, and that is the worst part. It's the type of film you never expected to see nowadays, it's the type of film you don't want to see nowadays, and yet it was there right before my eyes, and I couldn't believe it, and I just had to put it on this list because, wow. Number 2, we have Fantasy Island, one of the 2 movies that I give an F to this year. And behind this film, based on the old TV show, is my favorite team, the team that is apparently now adapting group games or tabletop games and making them into horror movies. First there was Truth or Dare, now they have Fantasy Island, and I think they're working on another. It's probably the lie detector game. People are going to tell lies and they're going to die if they lie answering to a question. I cannot wait to watch that movie, give it an F, and then put it on my top 10 worst movies of whatever it is the year that it comes out. Because it's the same thing again. These characters are not likable, motivations change on a dime, twists and turns coming to the film that just leave you scratching your head how these things were approved in the pipeline before they made the movie. The only good thing I guess to come out of this film is that people got a nice vacation working on it. The actors, the crew, the actors don't really need the movie to pay for their vacation, but you know, they got it. It's just constant nonsense throughout this film that doesn't add up. And again, the motivations are either lacking or constantly changing. And again, here are the 2 bros who wrote Songbird going on vacation. This is probably when they wrote Songbird. And that was actually the most distracting thing about this film, was that these 2 dudes have the exact same dynamic as they had in Like a Boss. And at number 1, finally, we have The Turning, a film that should not be on this list because this is not a movie. A film that I should not be calling a film because it's not a film. It's just a first act of what would be a film. This is that thing that you go and see and nothing happens. Literally nothing happens. If you've ever seen a review from me and I said that nothing happens in movie X or movie Y, call me out on my bullshit, because unless it was The Turning, something happens in 99.9% movies that I see. Not in The Turning though, it's just build and build and build. Credits come in. This production was hell. At one point it was meant to be directed by Steven Spielberg, then it changed hands. It has been in the works since 2016. Wow! Just nothing. It feels like it was in production in 2016, but then people noticed this wasn't an entire movie. It was just a first act and then it ended. But then they decided to make it anyway. They had nothing new to the horror genre. They had nothing new to this story. Thank the heavens we had a better adaptation later in the year through Netflix on The Haunting of Bly Manor. Because, my friends, if you want to make a movie, this ain't it. But those are my top 10 worst movies of the year. Mercifully, that was not a dishonorable mention. I just want to get this done and out there. But yeah, probably the bros who wrote Songbird are still out there making their next movie. Thank you so much for watching, my beautiful geekies. Remember to let me know your thoughts on my list. Share your list in the comments below, and stay tuned for the best movies of the year coming tomorrow, and on January 1st, my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2021. Thank you so much for watching. You are the best. Remember to stay tuned. And if you're new here, again, please consider clicking the subscribe button if you have seen thus far and haven't done so yet, because it helps me out, helps the channel, and it's free. So until the next video, stay beautiful, stay geeky, but most importantly, above everything else, forever and always, love each other and love the movies.